Golden Doves, class 238, page 146. Unbelievably, this is the last class. I believe we are now going to finish this book. This is really incredible. Wow. Okay, let's do it. Transmission and change. This is like, I'm excited. The dynamics of tradition were clearly understood by Igor Stravinsky, who wrote, tradition is entirely different from habit. I love that. People think like, there's a minhag to, eat gefilte fish Friday night, and they don't understand the difference between minhag to eat gefilte fish and the halakha to put on tefillin, right? And I would also say that about Sephardic food, right? I don't know. We have soup. I don't know, chicken soup or whatever. Himbajin. Okay, it's a habit. It's not formally part of the masoret of Am Yisrael, right? So tradition is entirely different from habit, even from an excellent habit, right? It could be a great habit, right? It could be an amazing way. I have a minhag to sing Pizmonim. Ki esh mera Shabbat, ki esh mera Shabbat. It's a beautiful song, beautiful words. That's a habit, right? For habit is by definition an unconscious acquisition and tends to become mechanical. Interesting. Nobody ever wrote a book which said you have to sing Ki Yesh Mera Shabbat Friday night. I like that, unconscious acquisition. Whereas tradition results from a conscious and deliberate acceptance. And when you talk about tradition, about Masoret, you're actually talking about the idea of that the Hachamim, the chains in the tradition, they consciously received the Masoret from the previous generation of Hachamim, and they consciously transmitted it, and I would say not just consciously, but consciously and meticulously transmitted it to the next generation. And that's why the Gemara is so particular, and it's such a kanut, and is so careful in ascertaining whether a particular baraita is a correct baraita, or can be relied on, cannot be relied on, precisely because there is this intentional knowing transmission, right? Continuing in the quote of Igor Stravinsky, a real, and it's a conscious and deliberate acceptance. So it's not just the transmission, but it's the acceptance. A real tradition is not the relic of a past, irretrievably gone. It is a living force that animates and informs the present. That's so important, because a lot of times people say, oh, the Jewish people, they got this from the ancient Egyptians. They put on tefillin because the ancient Egyptians put on tefillin, or some other sort of nonsensical statement. They always say, we have the law of lo tignov because the code of Hammurabi has lo tignov. But what people fail to realize is that the Torah is a living force, and our Masoret is a living force. And today, as a Jew 2,000 years ago, as a Jew in Ma'amad al-Sinai, lo tignov. It informs my decisions today. Code of Hammurabi, not Code of Hammurabi. But there is nobody today who says, oh, the Code of Hammurabi says this, and therefore I will do that. It doesn't exist. Nobody follows. There is no nation today that follows the Code of Hammurabi, or that follows the ancient law of the Egyptians to put on phylactery, right, to the extent that they used to put something on. So that's really important. That's what makes the Masoret of Am Yisrael so special. All right, I think I'm going to finish it today. Maybe I misspoke, but I'm going to try. Okay, that was the end of the quote. Now continuing in my father's book. Again, Golden Doves and Silver Doubts, page 146. This concept of tradition implies an unfolding concept of history, whereby transmission and change are synonymous, as in Shana, the Hebrew root of Mishnah. So the Mishnah is the encapsulation of the entire Torah Shebe'al Peh, at least as Rabbi Akiva formulated the Torah Shebe'al Peh, and then Rabbi Meir, then Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So Mishnah comes from the word shana. So shana, of course, means to recite, but it also means to change, because it's never the same. I do kiddush today on wine, and 1,000 years ago they said they did kiddush on wine. And let's say on Shekinah Gedolah, 2,500 years ago, let's say they instituted kiddush on wine, more or less, whatever the years come out. The meaning of wine changed, meaning the symbolism of wine in today's society is a little different than the symbolism of wine in the society back then, which is to say that nothing is static, nothing remains the same. So yes, we do kiddush on the same wine, and even if it's exactly the same wine, even the wine process, the wine making process is the same, and nothing changed, which of course is not correct. Everything changed, and yet it's kind of like a river. So think of a river, and the water is going in the river, and it's the same water going in the river, so it's going downstream, but the shapes are always changing, and the environment is always changing, and the climate changes, and the topography changes. So the meaning of the water changes, right? Because nothing exists free of a context, right? So the context, of course, is society. Society is always changing. Relationships are changing. Words, the meaning of words are changing. It's that idea of Mishnah. It's not that we're saying that when we put on tefillin today, it's not the same tefillin as then. That's not what I'm saying. But the consciousness of tefillin, with every single day, it attains a new type of consciousness. Let me give you an example. We live in America, so I walk the Knesset in the morning, and I think about, so America has gone down from a moral perspective, especially with the woke nonsense. I mean, it's really become a grotesque. The values of the woke are grotesque and disfigured. I mean, it's like a monstrosity. It's just, for lack of a better word, just grotesque. And we live in this sort of grotesque world where every ugly thing is, they try to tell you, oh, this is really beautiful. Nothing more beautiful than, I don't know, whatever. Okay. A fat lady with a beard. That's the epitome of beauty, let's say. So as I walk the Knesset, and I'm comforted by the fact that soon I'm going to be putting on tefillin, and I will have the name of God upon me. And, it gives me comfort in a way that maybe people who lived in a previous generation where they didn't have these types of grotesque things, maybe they had other things, but they probably did for sure, right? So the meaning of tefillin becomes more, it attains a new significance, right? Because society is changing, so the meaning of things in the society changes. So again, quoting Stravinsky, far from implying the repetition of what has been, tradition presupposes a reality of what endures. That's beautiful. The reality of what endures. Not just about what has been. It appears as an heirloom, a heritage that one receives on condition of making it bear fruit before passing it on to one's descendant. That's beautiful, right? So we don't just put on tefillin, but we get a new consciousness of tefillin. And there's certain hidurim that they have today in tefillin that maybe they didn't have back then. Maybe they couldn't have the hidurim back then. We have, and I'm not getting into the machlokat whether the tefillin is gevil, sustos, or kelaf. I mean, what Rambam says it's kelaf, but the point is there seems to be some confusion as to what kelaf is and what duchsustos says. Put that on the side. But I'm saying we can. There's an abundance of tefillin today. There is the ability for everybody to put on tefillin. It wasn't always like that, right? So yeah, right. Understood in this way. So it takes on new fruit. So now because we have such an overabundance, Baruch Hashem, anybody could put on tefillin, and then there's charitable organizations that give out tefillin for free to people who want to put on tefillin but can't afford tefillin, right? And all that type of system that's in place today that wasn't in place then, right? So it's bearing fruit in a sense, right? Yeah. Understood in this way. tradition, the accumulation of wisdom throughout the ages, presents a perennial challenge for excellence to future generations. Right, that's beautiful. So tradition is not just about following the past. The challenge of tradition is what excellent message can I give to the future generations? And if it's exactly what my father gave me, that's a problem. That means I didn't add anything. There's no fruit. It didn't bear fruit, right? The Torah is es hayim ila machazikim ba, right? All right. So going on, continuing in the book, understood in this way, the accumulation of wisdom throughout the ages presents a perennial challenge for excellence to future generations. Right? We're not told to be the same. We're told to be better. And here is a quote. This quote is going to be Hellenism and Jewish. No, I'm sorry, Mehila, completely off. Poetics of music. I guess this is also Stravinsky. Oh wow, that's great. I guess he must have been a musician. Yeah. Okay, Brahms was 60 years after Beethoven. From the one to the other, and from every aspect, the distance is great. They do not dress the same. Brahms did not dress like Beethoven, right? But Brahms follows the tradition of Beethoven without borrowing one of his habiliments. For the borrowing of a method has nothing to do with observing a tradition. So give me a moment I want to see, when did Brahms live relative to Beethoven? So let's see. Yeah. Let's just do it again. Read it again. I'm sorry, Brahms. Here it is. Brahms. I misspelt it. My apologies for the delay. Let's see. So Johannes Brahms. So he was born in Hamburg, Germany in 1833. He was a German composer and pianist. Okay, let's read that sentence again. Brahms was born 60 years after Beethoven. From the one to the other, and from every aspect, the distance is great. They do not dress the same. But Brahms follows the traditions of Beethoven without borrowing one of his habiliments. Right? I mean, I don't dress exactly like my grandfather dressed, I'm pretty sure. My grandfather having been born, so I don't have the habiliments of my grandfather. And I'm pretty sure that my grandchildren will not have my habiliments, my outer form, right? Okay. For the borrowing of a method has nothing to do with observing a tradition. A method is replaced. A tradition is carried forward in order to produce something new. That's so beautiful. That's really beautiful. So Brahms follows the tradition of Beethoven, right? So again, a method has nothing to do with observing a tradition. A method is replaced. A tradition is carried forward in order to produce something new. Tradition thus assures the continuity of creation. It assures the continuity of creation because we're always called upon to create. And in a sense, that's why Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hachamim said they were like shutafim with Kadosh Baruch Hu in his creation. Right? Asher bara Elohim la'asot is, we're supposed to be osim. He created Asher bara Elohim la'asot, that we should continue the tradition of creation. Wow. This peculiar notion of tradition and the type of response that it demands is essential for a proper understanding of Judaism. If you don't understand this, you don't understand Judaism. Really, you really need to understand this idea of creativity, of adhering to the traditions of the past, not in a static way, where the river just stops, where you put a dam and you stop the water, but where the water continues and the water is always giving, is always fertilizing and giving replenishment to the soil around, right? Right. The continuity of Israel, the uninterrupted chain of transmission from the patriarchs to Moses, and from Moses through countless ages to the present, our own struggle to transmit to unborn generations a message we have yet to articulate. Wow. What is the message of Judaism? What are we looking to articulate? Right? We have yet to articulate the message, and which we can never hope fully to comprehend. All this can be meaningful only when the dynamics of tradition are fully grasped. The rabbis understood this quite well. Contrary to popular opinion, continuous progress as a specific responsibility to the challenge of the past is essential to rabbinic tradition. Wow. Again, continuous progress as a specific responsibility to the challenge of the past. My father, Alav Shalom, he challenged me. And the challenge was not to be his parrot, not to just repeat, not to stop. His challenge to me was to continue, was to learn more, was to add more. Right? This is in stark opposition to the idea of idolatry in the yeshiva world, where everybody has to become an intellectual eunuch, and the Rebbe will tell us what the truth is, and next to the Rebbe, what are you and who are you, and you are nothing. So you basically must castrate yourself in the presence of the Rebbe, and so you live your life as a castrado. That's not Judaism. Judaism is to live, is to have a living spirit within you, which is founded completely on the tradition of the past, but it's alive. So it continues forward. There's progress, there's new fruit, there's new branches, there's new perspectives, all connected to the tree, of course. Scripture had faulted the honor of a dead righteous man for the sake of a living righteous man, said the rabbis. Again, Scripture had faulted the honor of a dead righteous man for the sake of a living righteous man, said the rabbis, implying thereby that the latter was more deserving than the former. Right? Let's say that again. So the latter, which is the living righteous man, was more deserving than the former, which is the dead righteous man. So, let's see, where is this? Where is this located? Well, we're getting to the very end of the footnotes. And the very end of the footnotes is Midrash Shemuel. No, not Mehila, not Midrash Shemuel. Seems to be some confusion. I see. Yerushalmi Shevi'it. Okay. Comparing Aharon HaKohen, one of the most glorious figures of the Jewish past, with two priests of latter generations, the rabbis remarked that if Aharon had been present in their time, each of them in his generation would have been greater than Aharon. Wow, that's really just such a profound point, because Aharon to us is the epitome and symbol of piety, of spiritual beauty in a human being. And yet they say that if these two Kohanim lived in the days of Aharon, they would have outdone Aharon. But the point is, they would not exist, but for the fact that they are the continuation of the tradition of Aharon. But so you see how tradition allows the future generations to surpass the past generations. I know that there's an idea of, Yeridat HaDorot, that we're always worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So I don't know if we finally become, what we become. And this is a rejection of Yeridat HaDorot, meaning there may be cases where there was Yeridat HaDorot. We're not saying that's not, I'm not saying that, there was never Yeridat HaDorot, but there could also be Aliyat HaDorot, but the same virtue, right? So this idea, must be Yeridat HaDorot, is antithetical to the idea of tradition in Judaism. The tension between reverence for the past and commitment to further progress is resolved in the following illustration cited by the Yitzhak ibn Sur, one of the leading Talmudists of his time. I love my father's books because he brings people that nobody ever heard of, right? Today, everybody heard of Rabbi Moshe Hazan. I heard there's even a book on Rabbi Moshe Hazan. I wonder if it quotes my father's book. Probably, I think it does. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Like, my father wrote a book on it. He published a Kitfei Yad, Alav Shalom, and he brought it to the attention of the world, in a sense. But the point is, Rabbi Yitzhak Leon ibn Sur. Maybe other people heard of him. I never heard of him, right? Other than in this book, of course. So he was a great Sephardi Talmudist, one of the leading Talmudists of his time. In the name of his contemporary, the renowned Jewish humanist, Rabbi Shlomo Almoli, another Chacham I never heard of. Almoli took it from the famous writer Rabbi Abraham Nathan of Rabbi Tzidkiah Anab. Again, another Chacham I never heard of. He in turn quoted it in the name of the venerated jurist Rabbi Yeshaya Ditrani. Okay, but maybe someone heard of Ditrani, the Mabit, Rabbi Moshe Ditrani, Rabbi Yeshaya Ditrani. Okay, and he heard it from Gentile sages. Whoa, that's crazy. Okay, wow, a giant, by virtue of his height, commands a better range of view than a dwarf. If the dwarf, however, climbed onto the giant's shoulders, he would be able to command a better view than the latter. In the same fashion, we are like dwarves standing on giants' shoulders. Since we have learned from their knowledge, we who have investigated further than our predecessors have gained this knowledge thanks to their knowledge, and thus we now know whatever we know. I'll end with a story. When I was young, my father used to take me, used to take me to see many great Hachamim. I met Rabbi Yosef Messas, other great Hachamim, and always the Hachamim would give me a beracha, which honestly I'm a little humbled by. I feel it's just, but the beracha always was, you should be as great as your father. So my father would always answer, no, he should be greater than his father. Now, we once went to visit the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, Rabbi Chaim Halevi, this many years ago. Obviously, he was still alive. And he said, you should be greater than your father. And my father liked it a lot. So I asked my father, I was young, but I was sufficiently intelligent to understand that it's perhaps a bit unrealistic. Because really my father was once in centuries. Anyway, so I recognize that. And I asked my father, what type of beracha is that? And he brought me this mashal. And he said, whatever he's doing, I'll climb on his shoulders. And because I'll climb on his shoulders, I'll see things that he never saw. Anyway, that's the end of Golden Doves. I hope it was just nice teaching it. I appreciate those of you who've been following the classes. I appreciate that.